I am Matthew Jenkins Yarashevitz, Music Director Designate of the Canton Symphony Orchestra.
And I'm Rachel Hagemeyer, President and CEO.
This is Orchestrating Change. Today we are joined by Mary Verdi-Fletcher, a professional wheelchair dancer and the founding artistic director of the Dancing Wheels Company, a physically integrated dance troupe that has operated in Northeast Ohio for over 4 decades. She also founded the Dancing Wheels School, which has since become the world's epicenter for professional training in physically integrated dance. She and her company performed with the Canton Symphony Orchestra in 2015, where they were part of the world premiere of Stephen Melillo's Symphony No. 4, Lightfall, and also danced to the Adagietto from Mahler's Fifth Symphony. She has been a tireless advocate for equal rights for disabled people, including lobbying for the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Mary Verdi-Fletcher, welcome to Orchestrating Change.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mary, it's so nice to talk with you today. We've gotten to know you just a little bit. Were you at the symphony when Dancing Wheels was here?
No, I was not. It was 2 years before I arrived.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, and I wasn't here either, but you joined us for Gerhardt's memorial concert, which was really wonderful, and we got to see the video. So really wonderful that we got to meet you there. But if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about you and who you are and how you became, how dance kind of really entered your life as a person.
Yes. Well, I was born with my disability. It's spina bifida, and my mother was a professional dancer and my father was a musician. So I always say I was born with the avocation to dance or to be a part of the arts. So it kind of drew me throughout my whole life. And, way back when I first started, there was no dance, on a professional level for people who had physical disabilities. And it sort of came to me naturally. I was doing social dance and experimenting with my non-disabled friends who were good dancers. And we found that really it was just such a unique way of moving that people hadn't thought of. So it was a little bit like skating, ice skating or skating and dance together. So using your feet and your wheels. And it had such momentum and a fluidity that, it really inspired people to see dance in a very different way. And even people who weren't dance aficionados seem to gravitate to this form of dance. It offers so much energy and exciting opportunities for movement that many, many people gather to see it. And we actually travel and perform throughout the world today. We are in our 43rd season, and we have 10 full-time dancers, both what we consider stand-up and sit-down dancers together.
That's remarkable. And I have to ask before we go any further, you mentioned your parents were both musically inclined, one a musician, one a dancer, and your last name is very well known in the music world. Are you by chance related to Giuseppe Verdi?
Well, they think that possibly we have a connection there, a family connection. My father's hometown was Abruzzi, so that's very close to where Giuseppe Verdi lived as well. So, if you've traveled to places like Italy, you'll see that small towns, almost everyone is related in one way or another. So, I haven't really done the tracking of the actual history on that, but now you've given me an idea to pursue that.
Excellent. Well, I hope you will report back to us. I'd be very, very curious.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about how you got into dance in a formal way. You were really one of the first people to do what you do. So there wasn't exactly established training as there now is at the Dancing Wheel School. So what was your training like to get into this?
Well, over the years, is like I said, working with non-disabled dancers and learning from them. But then eventually I had a relationship with Cleveland Ballet. So the original Cleveland Ballet, and I studied in the School of Ballet there. And then I started to work with choreographers from all over the country. So each of them had different techniques. And one of our first relationships was with Mae O'Donnell, who was one of the Martha Graham dancers years and years before. And I worked with her dancers. And so we started with the O'Donnell technique because it made perfect sense in their class structure. They started their warm up on the floor in a seated position. So those of us in wheelchairs were seated as well. So we were able to look at how to translate that movement and make it possible for everyone in the room to dance together. And then obviously it grew and grew. So my experience with ballet and contemporary and modern dance developed through the relationships that we had with our choreographers and teachers.
Wow. So going back just a moment here, how difficult was it for you to convince the Cleveland Ballet to allow you to study with them?
Well, I actually entered into a relationship with them because they were in need of outreach and educational programs. And I had been dancing with a non-disabled partner for a number of years. So the company or the name Dancing Wheels was familiar to them. And we had already been covered by CNN and Good Morning America, and were traveling nationwide doing performances. So they were quite familiar with our work. And when I proposed to them the opportunity to build a program with the ballet dancers, myself, and some other wheelchair users who were studying dance, they were eager to do that. And so while I was there, was able to embark on those relationships and study while I was there as well.
When you were little, when you were little, did it feels like you were never told no? And tell me if that's wrong, but like when you were little and you were, wanting to do dance, did the dance world welcome you, especially since you had a mother who did dance? Or did you feel like as a young person, you're like, no, people are like, I can't do that?
Well, when I was really little, my people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'd say, well, I want to be a dancer. And they would kind of like pat me on the head and roll their eyes. They wouldn't say no, but they were in disbelief because they had never seen anything like that. And originally I had braces and crutches when I was very, very little. And then I broke my leg and had to use a wheelchair for mobility. And I was little. I'm still little. I weigh 75 pounds, but I was mighty, I think, because I broke the braces and then I broke the wheels off the wheelchair, just moving. But I remember, and, it's funny because those recollections didn't come to me early on, but I remember my mother fostering music and dance. She would put little dances together for my brother and I in our family room. And he would do some lifts with me, a fish, it's called a fish. And then, it was many years where I just loved music and gravitated to it. But it wasn't until actually the disco days. You guys are probably too young to remember any of that.
Yes, we are.
But there was a lot of social dancing, and so a lot of people were just going out and dancing with, each other, and they were doing ballroom dance and so forth. So, I had some friends that just said, well, let's try. Let's see what we can do, like from the wheelchair and such. So there was such a wonderful way to do the holds, like you see in the ballroom dance, using the wheelchair and a stand-up dancer together. And so we would go to the clubs and, just have fun. And it seemed like everybody wanted to dance with me because it was just so unique. And then eventually they had this big competition. It was a national television competition. It was called Dance Fever. And what would happen is that the producer would go from city to city, and they would do these local competitions and then choose the dancers that would be on the national TV show. So people saw us and they were like, oh, are you going to enter the competition? And at first I was like, oh, no, we're just having fun. And it turned out the more they said it, we said, well, maybe we should try. So I just signed up for us. It was my partner, David, and I. And it didn't occur to me to tell them I was a wheelchair user. So I just called up and gave our names, and they gave us a number to be in the competition, and I showed up. So they were kind of astounded that somebody in a wheelchair was in this dance competition. There were 2,000 people in the audience that night. And this producer was sitting at a judge table. And when I came out, he was leaning forward. Like you could tell he was like, oh my gosh. So we busted out a dance to It's Raining Men by the Weather Girls.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So I had, what's considered today an old-fashioned wheelchair. They were heavy and they had, stationary arms. They're kind of like what you would see in a hospital, but that was kind of a modern day wheelchair then. So, I wasn't getting lifted out of the chair at that time. So to do our spectacular finish, my dance partner was a gymnast in school. So he decided that he could take a flying leap from across the floor, jump on my armrest, and then jump over my head. And that was our match. Well, the crowd went wild. We got a standing ovation. And we were chosen as alternates to go to California to be on the show. So ironically, I looked over at the judge, and he had thrown himself back in his chair by the time. So he said to me, and this was before the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So, equality for people with disabilities wasn't as prevalent back then. And he said to me, I felt like I was darned if I did and darned if I didn't. He goes, if I chose you to go to California as a number one, they would have said I chose you because you were disabled. He goes, and if I didn't choose you, they would say I didn't choose you because of you were disabled. So they chose us as alternates to go to California, which probably was a brilliant idea at the time, given that whole situation. But, I said, well, you need to judge us on our merit. Like, how did we do as dancers and the crowd reaction and so forth? That's how they all get judged. And so that was it. We were chosen as alternates. And then shortly thereafter, the media just went crazy. So we were on all the national shows. We were asked to be a part of a Walt Disney competition that was called Up and Coming. So we did that. And before you know it, we were being requested to perform all over the country.
Wow.
So I was looking at opportunities of how to go into the schools, educate our children, our young people about, the abilities of all people, and also who could and should be a part of dance. A lot of people at that time thought that only guys who were gay should be ballet dancers, or you know, there was a lot of stereotypic views that I wanted to eliminate. And so when we became part of Cleveland Ballet, that was the mission, is that we educate our students. And I also looked at ways of, handling that financially. And I learned how to get sponsorship from a woman who owned a dog, that went into all the schools, and Whoops the Wonder Dog was a sort of a trick dog, and they got sponsorship from CalCan. And I thought, well, if that dog can do it, I can do it too. So I ended up going to Invacare Corporation, which is in Elyria, and they're wheelchair manufacturers. And they help support our tours. For years, they did that. And so that was kind of our first sponsorship to help us get into the schools.
Wow.
That's amazing. Really quickly, back up a second. Are you from this area originally? Did you grow up in Northeast Ohio?
Yes. I actually was born in Bracknell, Ohio, and then moved to Menor, and then moved to Willoughby, and now I'm in Sag Hills. So I've always been based here in Cleveland.
Always been an East Sider.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been a West Sider ever since I've lived here. So
I know they usually, if you're East side, you stay more or less east, and if you're west, you stay west. Right?
Oh, it's true. My fiance and I are prime examples of that ourselves. So tell us a little bit about the founding of Dancing Wheels itself. What precipitated you actually taking the step to incorporate and bring dancers together of all abilities, and then from the company founding the school?
Right. Well, I had been doing it as a partnership in a trio for a number of years, and then building the interest from the ballet dancers who wanted to be a part of it as well. And so the more we traveled and toured, the more people had requested to find out more about it and how could you be a part of it. And that's, I decided that I would create it as a nonprofit organization so that we could do more and serve more. So I established a 501c3 and built a board of directors out of a small composition initially of people who were interested, some friends and so forth. And it just, and my husband has a financial background. So he, with his accounting background, was able to set up the books and so forth. It originally started right in our own home. So one of my bedrooms was turned into an office, and that's where everything happened. And then hired an assistant to help with touring. And I learned early on about, getting an agent. At that time, people were like, oh, that's not what concert dance does. They don't have an agent. And I'm like, well, you got to put the show on the road. So you need somebody that can go to conferences and basically sell your work. And, I had a business background as well. I had majored in business in school. So I felt like my knowledge and ability in a management sense, and also my artistic drive, was a really good combination for the organization, because I could balance, both an artistic vision and how to keep the business of the arts equitable. So, I learned from others how to grow a board, how the many levels of a board, and how to diversify it, how to raise funds. And I always had a sort of a hard time asking for money. Um, because I was always a person that did everything basically on my own. So to ask for help or whatever seemed not within my DNA. But then when I looked at it as, I wasn't asking for myself, I was asking for the development um, of the organization. That seemed to help me get over being afraid to ask. Now they say, "Oh, don't ask Mary if you can do anything for her because she for sure will find something for you to do." But so we have over 25 members on the board of directors now from all walks of life and interest. The organization is kind of three-pronged in terms of what people have a desire to support. So we have the disability side, education and children, and the artistic product. So depending on, their interest, it depends on our approach to the funding area. A lot of it grew out of other people's desires as well. So the school, for instance, we had been doing in intermediate, like small classes and such. And a woman came to me, she was from out of state, and she said, "Would you teach my daughter if she spends a week with you? Could you just, introduce her to dance and teach her?" So we were like, okay. And by that time, I was also accessing the studios at Cleveland Ballet. So we had to taken this little girl in a wheelchair and we taught her. And then the woman said, you should teach all these little girls in wheelchairs to dance. So we started like summer intensive programs and then weekly classes. And so at that point, we were, well, let's establish a school so that those that want to either come up the ranks in dance or those that just have a plain interest in moving and the, socialization that it creates can have that opportunity. So in 1990, we created the school and now we have not only the school that's based in our home in Cleveland, but we also do a lot of outreach and educational programs that are built on residencies or master classes. So it's really grown out of the desires of others. And also my desire to grow the organization. Sometimes I can't help myself because I'm very competitive and I always wanted our company to be in the mainstream and to be on the same programs, on the same stages as those companies that are not disabled, that don't have disability in their mission. And that's what we've done. We wanted to be world class and we wanted to reach the world. So in 2015, we established the tagline for Dancing Wheels to be the World Center for Integrated Dance and Arts Access. And that's in our logo. It's in our mission to reach outward and to allow people of all abilities to understand what physically integrated dance is and to be a part of it in the way that they would like to be. So it's really grown over the years. When I think about it, I always thought it would get easier to run the organization, but it's actually gotten harder because the more people involved and the more programs and so forth that you offer, takes a lot of time and effort. And, it's, like I said, been 43 years that we've been doing this, but we're going strong and really appreciate community support.
Yeah,
Definitely.
You just mentioned the kind of rebrand in 2015, and you also added a component of teaching people how to teach integrated dance in 2016. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what is curriculum for integrated dance? Like how is it different, and why is it so important that you all are offering this, teaching people how to teach integrated dance?
Yeah, so it stemmed from the fact that a lot of teachers were kind of flummoxed or didn't understand how to do integrated, inclusive classes. So, how do you teach somebody in a wheelchair to do ballet, or why do you even teach somebody in a wheelchair to do ballet? How do you teach a class that's taking Graham, or any kind of modern class, and make it accessible so that they understand the methodologies behind it, but also the thought behind the benefits of learning. So we, myself, and Mark Tomasic, who is our artistic advisor, created a manual in 2012 and a DVD. Off of that, a lot of it was sold throughout the world, actually. And from that, we thought, let's establish a certification program, a program by which the teachers can learn this methodology. So myself, Mark Tomasic, Catherine Meredith, and later Sarah Lawrence Sakato, we created a artistic team, and then later put an advisory board together to look at what did we want to achieve through this? What would it look like? How did it differ from other certification programs? And what we found is that the inquiry about it was, how do you evaluate somebody from a sit-down position to a stand-up position? Why do these people want to take ballet? And so the answers came from that, and it turned out that we can teach an entire non-disabled ballet class based off the knowledge of the terminology used. So we know what a tendu is. We know what it looks like from using the feet. But also, we were able to translate it to the upper body as well. And, we need to strengthen and stretch and have flexibility in our upper body, as well as those that are standing in their lower body. So to strengthen muscles and to stretch muscles, those were the basis of taking a translated version of ballet, and how to work at the bar when you're using one arm versus the one leg, and how do you leap across the floor, how do you propel your chairs, so those kinds of aspects. And it turned out that also people didn't know the mechanics of the chair. Teachers didn't understand the mechanics of the chair. So we started with the very basics of it. What kinds of chairs might a student come in with? Is it a lightweight, sort of like what we use in the company, very lightweight chair with high-powered wheels, like you would use on a racer bike? Or is it a standard wheelchair with inflated, non-inflated tires that maybe don't move as fast as what ours do? And then evaluating, the strengths of the sit-down dancer as well. Many people with various disabilities have to approach their movement from a different way. So understanding disability, the terminologies behind the disability, and being able to evaluate based on what the teacher's desires are for the entire class. So those are the kinds of things that we offer. It's a week-long intensive, and people come from around the country to participate in it. And there's testing so that the participant has a practicum experience of developing a class, but also written testing so that we understand their level of comprehension with it. So it's my big goal for that, though, is that on a university level, currently, I'd say there's few to none in terms of dance programs that allow for someone in a wheelchair with a physical disability to get a degree in dance. And that's because they don't understand these processes. And so my goal is that eventually every university will have the opportunity to embrace people with physical disabilities who want to dance and become degreed dancers, have that opportunity to do so.
I have a follow-up question just that I thought about as you were telling us a little bit about this. Is there a standard wheelchair that all of the sit-down dancers of Dancing Wheels of the professional company dance in?
At one point, we all used the Invacare chair, the action chair. And then they also created a dance chair that was called a twirl. And it was basically their high-level chair that could be used for heavier activities, strong, athletic activities. But they added a bar in the back that had a wheel. So essentially the chair you could take off the side wheels and move it laterally. Whereas a normal chair doesn't move laterally. You have to turn it to be able to move it sideways. But today, most of the people that do come in, either they have their own chair that's equipped to be athletic, a faster paced chair, or we may offer up some of the ones that we have available through that former sponsorship that we had.
Got it.
Yeah. Chairs are like my chair that I use. I needed a chair that I could have the mobility to pull it into my car. And as I said before, I only weigh 75 pounds. So I was looking for a collapsible chair that I could pull into the car, but also had a rigid frame capacity. So my chair has a hard back that you can pull off, and the seat is hard that comes off, and then it folds up. So for me, it's and they don't have chairs that are made for in the way that I needed it to for my size. So I kind of had this special chair made for me.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about your performance with the Canton Symphony Orchestra in 2015 and what it was like to be a part of a world premiere commissioned piece for the Canton Symphony and Dancing Wheels.
Well, the executive director at that time and I met, and she had mentioned that, you were celebrating the conductor's anniversary. And he had a disability, and so did I. And it was one of our anniversaries as well. So they felt like commissioning a new work would be super exciting. And we did too. And I actually secured another commission or part of the commission was a choreographer that I had worked with, that I knew that had knowledge of how to work with the symphony. I believe he had worked a number of times with the symphony. His name was Bobby Wessner.
Oh, yeah.
So,
we did work. I was here when we worked with him on Carmina Burana in 2018 with Neos Dance Theater. So I do remember him.
Yes. So unfortunately, Neos is no longer operational, but here and there I've contacted Bobby. He's contacted me. So we've kept in touch along the years. So then they proposed the work, the music, and we rehearsed. He created the work and we rehearsed in the studios. And then the symphony and Dancing Wheels came together just on, I think it was only 2 rehearsals, actually. And it just was a glorious coming together. It was almost magical, and had that, kind of religious experience where you know that it's a higher force than just yourself. And we love working with live music. So it just was a great pleasure for us and a memorable experience. The other piece that we did, I am in a standing contraption. So I'm actually strapped into a device that allows me to stand on one leg and dance with my stand-up dancers. It was always kind of a dream of mine to be able to be at that level, standing and moving at the same time. So it's a wheeled device, and it was all partnering. So it just was a beautiful experience.
So during the rehearsal process for just the dancers, it's a world premiere work. So obviously there's no recording of another orchestra playing it that you could dance to. So did you have a piano reduction, or was there a MIDI file? How did you guys rehearse?
Yeah, the composer created a musical sort of demo, if you will,
yes,
for us to have the tempos and understand the music. It actually ended up, though, that there was a glitch in that. So, like, last minute, he had to rewrite something for the orchestra. We were like, oh, we ran out of music. But he did, and we did, and it, just like anything else, you have to go with the flow and take care of whatever might be a mishap. So that's what we did, and the Mahler piece, of course, that's music that we had, and the orchestra was able to, or symphony was able to reconstruct it, very closely, use the same music score. So the only difference is a lot of times, and we've had this experience with a number of live music situations where the tempos, be really consistent with the dancers and the musicians. And sometimes we had a different orchestra that we were working with, and it was a very fast piece. It was a Vivaldi piece, and they got excited seeing us dance, so they kept speeding up. At one point, one of the dancers said, "Slow down, we can't dance that fast,"
I know a little bit about this. We did the Nutcracker with the Canton Ballet. It was the first time the orchestra had done it with the ballet in 25 years, and it was my first ever Nutcracker. And I had never worked with professional ballet dancers before. And, in an orchestra, if it's just the orchestra, whatever happens with the tempos, if it's 4 clicks slower or faster at the concert, no one's going to think anything of it. And it was remarkable for me, like, oh my gosh, this has to be so precise every time. And it was kind of stressful, but at the end of the day, it was great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So a little bit about the advocacy work that you've done, and I just wanted to touch on all of the work that you've done in the space. Because you mentioned that the American Disabilities Act was not passed. It was not in existence before you got all of this started. And so I wanted to talk with you a little bit about kind of the different advocacy work you've done. And I know that you've sat on a lot of boards. You've worked really hard in Ohio on a lot of advocacy work and creating accessibility. And I think for people who are able-bodied, you never think, you don't think about that kind of stuff. And so I just wonder kind of like, how was that process for you of being a part of this advocacy work and just sharing a little bit about that with the work you've done in Ohio and then also with American Disabilities Act?
Yeah, actually, I've done national work with it as well. But for Ohioans, I actually spent 10 years at the first independent living center in the state of Ohio and created personal care assistance programs for the organization. I later then became in charge of their advocacy um, and created opportunities to go and advocate, lobby. We're not really allowed to lobby, but to educate on the disability rights. We saw that, there wasn't things like curb cuts or wheelchair accessible buses that were mainline buses. So, we would write to the legislature, we would provide testimony on the state level. And then, sometimes people just didn't get it. So we pushed for accessible public transportation for years, but the legislation wasn't happening. So we learned how to do what we consider like civil disobedience. Um, we captured buses in downtown Cleveland, and we learned how to do this. It was happening throughout the nation, but we learned that in order for the public, and obviously our public officials listened to the public, right, was to take a stand on this issue in a public way. So we learned from a group called ADAPT, and they were a group that taught how to do these sort of exercises in civil disobedience with the African American community, with the gay and lesbian community, with women's rights communities. So they taught them how to like picket and do things of that nature. So they said to us, what you need to do is, go to a public hearing one last time to the public authority, transit authority, and give them the opportunity to deny you access to public transportation. And once they do, be prepared, like have your picket signs. Ours said, we want to ride in 85 and access is a right, not a privilege, those kinds of things. They said, go out at noon on a one-way street in downtown Cleveland. And when a bus comes at a red light, stops at a red light, go in front of that bus, wheel right in front of the bus and don't move, and have your non-disabled friends, compatriots, get on the bus and tell the bus driver to turn off the engine and for the people on the bus to leave because the bus wasn't going to go anywhere. So we did that. And then they said, and then a second bus will come up to the same street, same stoplight, and it's a one-way street. So go in front of the second bus as well. So we did, and we held there for, they said it'll take about 3 hours. and call the media. So we did. And it was a great big to do because we blocked traffic for 3 hours at lunchtime. And the police came out. They tried to arrest us, but the jails were not accessible.
God, that's oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
And then, they just wanted to get us off the street. So they brought a door-to-door bus that normally had a 3-year waiting list, like if you wanted to use it. So I said, oh, I see you can take us to jail, but you can't take us to work or to school. And they drove that thing away as fast as you could possibly think. And, their second plan was that they were going to lock us up in the hospital instead of the jail because the jail wasn't accessible. So by the end of 3 hours, the transit authority came out and they made a pledge that every bus would be made accessible. So in the future, like they would either retrofit them or when they build a new bus, they build it with a lift. So they did.
How long? You said
amazing.
1985 was the year you did this. So how long did it take until all the buses were accessible?
I don't think there's...
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't remember how many years it took. I mean, it took literally years.
Years. Yeah.
But by 1990, is when the Americans with Disabilities Act was made into law. So by 1990, I would assume that had all been accomplished.
Wow. The reason I ask, when I was 12 years old, I started taking a city bus downtown. I grew up in Cincinnati, and I started taking a city bus downtown for school, to go to the School for Creative and Performing Arts. And not all of the buses in the Cincinnati bus system were accessible. And you had to look at the schedule, and it would have a little wheelchair icon on the schedule next to the ones that were guaranteed accessible. And the other ones might be accessible, but there was no guarantee.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember I was in New York City with a friend of mine who's a wheelchair user, and talking about curb cuts, right? Like we had to, it's still, we had to go an extra 4 blocks just to get a curb cut for her. At one point she said, screw it. And I helped her and she was in a motorized. I'm like, this thing is freaking heavy, Sarah. I can't lift this.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not going to work. But because there was a curb cut across the way, but not on this one. So she was like, what is happening here? And we were late for a Broadway show. And she was like, gosh darn it. So we just kind of skated off and figured it out. But it's, and the subway stops, most of them, the elevator's broken.
Not
and
all
hasn't
of them
been
are
fit.
accessible.
No, it's,
And, it's still happening, of course. There's times where I've seen the curb cuts are not equal on either side. It depends on what city you're in and what's happening. And we're constantly working with our young people too with disabilities to be advocates, because I think if they don't know the stories, if they haven't seen the change that occurred from the time we were young to now, they don't have that fervor. It's, not within them because it's already offered. So, you have to keep advocating. And in fact, we're doing a show in the next month, which is called Allies in Action. And it's about, the equality. We're reaching artists from the LGBTQIA plus community, but we're all sort of in this together. We've all had to suffer the indignities of inequality. We've all had to struggle for our identities. And so we want to celebrate where people are today, but we also know there's much work to be done.
Mm-hmm. I think it's just, because things can get repealed, acts can go away. And so it's important to make sure that we still talk about things. And, when just like walking around a city now, I try to notice for those who are blind, like, does the curb cut have the bumps so that if they're using a stick, they can see the bumps? Does the crosswalk talk or not, to let people know, things like that, and understanding, just how much of the world is not accessible. It's really, and when you don't have a disability, you don't notice it. You're not going to notice it. So I think it's really, that's so, your story with, I mean, like, that's amazing. I saw the Rosa Parks of disabilities, like, you guys standing in front of the bus, and the fact that the jail wasn't accessible. I mean, you're proving our point right now, guys. You are proving our point right now. That's so crazy. Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Yeah, and it really is. And even jumping back to that certification program, we do an accessibility stroll so that the participants can see what accessibility to look for and what's in their own communities. So they get a little job to do after the day to look at accessibility in their own environment. And to, we know some of them are, staying at hotels or whatever, but look around. What do you see?
Yeah. Wow.
And that helps you have a different view. I mean, you're fortunate to have had a friend or have a friend, with a disability, because it becomes second nature to you as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. We went to college. We went to New York together twice. We did several trips. And so, the van that we got from the school had to be accessible, and the hotel, when we were booking hotel rooms, are they actually accessible or not? It's, you get a hotel and you try to, you're like, this is not, and thinking of, we've had guest artists at the symphony, we had Rachel Barton Pine last year, and, making sure her, like, walking through the hotel to make sure it actually was what she would need, because she, she doesn't use a wheelchair, but she uses a stroller what is it called?
Scooter.
She uses a scooter. And so it was really important to make sure that all of that was there, and just all the things that you need.
Like our tour manager, I actually said to her, when you ask for an accessible room, ask for a wheelchair accessible room.
Because some of them are not wheelchair accessible.
No, and one hotel one time said, "Oh yeah, we have an elevator to get to the room." Well, that doesn't make it that's like only one part of the wheelchair accessible. Yeah.
Right. And, my dad is blind, legally blind, and it's been a long, drawn out process from fully sighted to basically unsighted. And the way that I've learned to look out for him, and now it's second nature. I don't even have to think about it. I'm always, whenever I'm together with him, I'm always looking out to make sure that he's going to be okay.
Right.
So it's a good thing for everybody to know somebody and experience that firsthand.
Yeah, for sure.
So as we're kind of finishing our conversation today, I was wondering, looking at, obviously there's been progress, which is great. But what can we maybe take in the orchestra world from your experience with Dancing Wheels, and just from the world of disability, of what as an orchestra can we be doing to make sure that our facilities, our musicians feel like everyone it is truly accessible and inclusive?
Sure. Well, my big philosophy has always been universal design. So if it's an environment that everyone can use, whether it's women or men with baby carriages, or someone who uses a walker, or someone who has, sensory or sighted, or, different types of challenges. If it's an environment where everybody can enjoy together, that is the optimum, of course. And how you do that so that it's not per se a special performance, but it's an inclusive performance. So, and, it might not always be possible, but I think looking for that universal aspect is the most important thing. Architecturally, some of the concert halls might have been very old, so it's difficult. But when we go into spaces, oftentimes we'll ask presenters, are your seats removable? So even if they have to unscrew them from the floor, they may have a few available for wheelchair users if they don't already have that space available. Offering sign interpretation, audio description. There's so many ways to feel welcoming from the standpoint of the audience, but also looking at the standpoint of the artist. So can an artist with a disability get on your stage? I happen to know yes, because I've been and but not all of them, again, are looking from the standpoint of the artist. They may have taken care of the seating situation or the audience, but not the artist. And I've changed in makeshift dressing rooms. I've had presenters have to bring in an accessible porta potty so that we can use the bathroom. So we have offered like alternative ways to engage accessibility, because we know that sometimes if a presenter is afraid that they're not ADA compliant, then they just don't have you, instead of saying, okay, we understand that we may not be able to do everything that's fully ADA, but let's see how we can make it accessible and comfortable for you. And, I think that's important. And it's important in two ways. If you don't have the experience of doing it, then you never will work towards that accessibility, because you say, oh, well, we've never had anybody with a disability on our stage, or, our space is too small to accommodate a greater number of people with disabilities. And so they just don't do it. It becomes a vicious circle of not doing instead of trying to do it the best that they can.
Definitely. So really quickly, before we let you go, we want to ask you the question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, how do we orchestrate change? It's very open-ended. Take it however you wish.
Orchestrating change is doing it. So seeing is believing. So when I went out for the first time to dance in the public eye, it immediately made change, but I had to do it first. So taking those steps towards, like I said before, inclusivity and acceptance, you have to put your foot forward. You have to do it first. And by your example, other change will happen.
Mary, thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to get to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope we can work together in the future.
Yeah.
We'd love
Definitely.
Yeah. It's been wonderful chatting with you and hearing your story and just how much cool stuff you've done. I mean, I hope I'm going to email you and see if there's a video of a dance of you dancing to It's Raining Men. I feel like I need to see that. I'm so that would be so cool. But thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Thank you very much for having me.
Mary Verdi-Fletcher, founding artistic director of Dancing Wheels.
Orchestrating Change is a production of the Canton Symphony Orchestra.
Our theme music was composed by Eric Gould and performed by Derek Snyder and Tim Adams.
Our audio engineer and mixer is Nathan Maslick, with video and audio editing by Shoreline Media.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.